Hey Parsec, I gotta get some stuff done. Do you think you can keep an eye on the collection for me? Okay, great. I'll be back soon. Just try to make sure nothing blows up.
How you get so big getting food of this kind?
Don't worry, there are no porgs harmed in the making of this video. Hey, welcome in. Thank you for joining me for this week's review of Star Wars Resistance. This week's episode is A Dangerous Business. I would give it like a hearty rating of it was fine, like it was good. I liked it. I don't know that it was the bestest, most excitingest episodist of any episode that I've ever seen, but I liked it. I think I'm kind of at a point now where they built up where the show is going so much with that mid-season trailer that I'm really ready to get to the episodes where like the big stuff's gonna happen, and we're still kind of in build up, so I'm starting to get a little bit more anxious as we kind of continue to get these more character-y episodes. But that said, I actually really liked the episode. I think that it's something where if I wasn't in a hurry to get where the show is going, if I already knew where the show was going, if I was watching the series back, I would appreciate it more than I do now, if that makes sense. But start to finish, it was really solid. Something I'd said about last week's episode is that this show is really capable of being really strong when it does multiple stories, right? So like last week we had the sea monster, as well as the story with Kaz and Sonara and all of these different things going on. And this episode was very much more straightforward. It was very much the singular story that the episode was telling, and it felt a little slower paced, but it was getting some very important things done while it was doing that. One of the things the episode did right from the get-go was something I was really hoping the show was going to do sooner or later, is it addressed the fact that the fireball is supposed to be Tam's, and that Kaz keeps taking Tam's eraser and crashing it because he goes on Poe adventures and all of these different things, and I felt like that was being really unfair to Tam, and I was hoping they were going to kind of resolve it in some way. And at the opening of this episode, Kaz is actually fixing up the fireball for Tam, so she doesn't have to do it on her own time. It's kind of like his peace offering for all of the crazy things that have been happening to the ship as it goes forward. And I really liked this salvo of friendship to her and this acknowledgement that he was doing this thing that was bothering her, even though he wasn't really doing it maliciously and he always had good reason for needing the fireball. I just like that he acknowledged that it really is supposed to be Tam and he was helping her out. And Tam kind of received that salvo of friendship in kind. She still ribs him, she still picks on him, but she ultimately is like, hey, thank you. And I just like seeing a true friendship between the two of them instead of kind of this tolerant ship that has been existing. Now, the whole setup for how that was even possible is, of course, that Kaz gets the parts to fix the fireball because he agrees to watch the acquisition station for Flix and Orka. As I said, from there, the plot is pretty straightforward. Kaz minds the shop, he helps a customer or two, and then eventually the bad guy shows up and tricks Kaz into revealing some important information. He then tricks Kaz away from the shop, traps him in this crate, and tries to get his buddy to drop that crate into the ocean. Meanwhile, bad guy sneaks back, tries to take the expensive part away, gets on a ship. Kaz gets out of the crate, makes it onto the ship that the bad guy was trying to leave on. Turns out that ship is a First Order ship. There's stormtroopers around. Kaz then has to sabotage this ship so that the First Order can't get the part, and then he returns back to the shop. I liked that throughout this episode, Kaz really wasn't that dumb. Yes, he does get tricked away by the bad guy, but he even says, like, he knows the guy is shady, so that's why he wants to investigate him. Like, he's not leaving the shop because he thinks everything's fine, he's leaving the shop because he thinks the most prudent thing to do is go and see what the guy is up to, which makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, the guy is one step ahead of him and locks him up in that crate. But even when he's in the crate, Kaz isn't helpless. He's calling to BB-8 for help, but BB-8 can't help him because BB-8's fighting off the bad guy. So Kaz has to rely on his own resourcefulness, and he finds a way to take a torch and a lens and make a super torch so he can MacGyver his way out of the crate and escape. And I thought that was really great. You know, he was able to kind of keep his cool and figure out what was going on, and we're basically seeing Kaz's skills increase as the show goes on. The other thing I really liked was this fight scene with BB-8 and the bad guy. BB-8 is sneaking around, hiding from this guy, tricking the guy by making other things roll around that look like BB-8, and then BB-8's like throwing things at him and zapping him. He uses like those wires that we see in The Force Awakens, and he like Spider-Mans into the bad guy's face, and it was really, really cool. In fact, that whole fight makes me kind of sad because I realized that as the show gets closer and closer to The Force Awakens, at some point BB-8 is going to leave Kaz and go back to Poe, where he really belongs. Which is good for Poe, but kind of bad for the show, because I really like watching BB-8. I suspect that CB-23 is going to kind of swap places, and that she will stay with Kaz, and BB-8 can kind of go back and join the major players in the films. Once Kaz gets on the ship that is in fact the First Order ship, he gets a very unlikely ally. See, throughout the episode, we've been seeing Flix and Orka's pet Grog, whatever they're called. It's the little piranha lizard. His name is appropriately Bitey. He was causing problems for Kaz, he was causing problems for BB-8. Anyway, he'd somehow found himself inside the piece that the bad guy stole, found his way onto the ship, and then Kaz is kind of stuck there. And it was a really strange moment because, on the one hand, I was really excited that, Kaz was basically going to save their pet cat. And then I was worried because Kaz tricks Bitey into biting onto the wires to crash the ship, and I was really worried about Bitey, and then it turns out Bitey really likes biting electricity, and it was totally amazing. I don't know if Kaz knew that, but it was really, really cool. And I liked that Kaz was somehow manipulating this piranha frog into helping him. I don't know, I thought that was kind of funny. I really like Bitey because I feel like Bitey doesn't want to bite you. Bitey doesn't necessarily want to attack you, but he also really wants to attack you, and it's he just kind of goes back and forth between emotion and instinct. It's really fun. Actually, Kaz's relationship with Bitey reminds me a lot of my relationship with my own pet crested gecko. I wake up every morning to him staring at me like he's just waiting to be big enough to eat me. And then, of course, for a brief moment, we think that Bitey was left behind when the ship explodes, and then it turns out he's still more resilient than even that, and he's able to return back to the Colossus. Now, at the end of the episode, when Kaz has to fess up to why the shop's a mess, what happened, why he doesn't have the expensive device, I was really worried that Flix and Orka were going to be their kind of crusty, grumpy selves and be really upset about it, but it turns out that they were actually pretty impressed that Kaz was able to go through and actually got a ship to blow up rather than let some guy get away with trying to steal their stuff. And in fact, they were already aware that this guy had been trying to steal their stuff for a while, and that he probably chose the day they were gone to attack. So ultimately, they really don't blame Kaz for anything, which I think is good because none of this was necessarily Kaz's fault. I think he did the best he could considering the situation he was in. But at the same time, they tell Kaz that he has to show up and work for them more to work off the debt for the big expensive piece that he let blow up on the First Order ship. So Kaz is still kind of having to own up to what happened without them actually being really cranky about it, and I thought it was just a really good balance to show, these guys are tough characters, but they're tough characters with hearts that I think at some level they must like Kaz or they wouldn't have asked, they wouldn't have worked out that deal to begin with. But at the same time, they're not going to cut him too much slack. And then the final thing about the episode is, of course, we learn that the strange device is an excavating device, and it leaves you to wonder, why does the First Order need this? Sure, it makes a lot of sense that they might need an excavation device to carve out the planet where the Starkiller base is so that they can complete the Starkiller base. Remember, we're getting closer and closer to The Force Awakens, so at this point, one would assume that the Starkiller base is at least mostly finished or at least mostly excavated, so why they would need this, I don't know. I think it's possible that we might find out that Starkiller base isn't actually done until The Force Awakens, that they're putting the finishing touches on it, and that they still might need an excavation device or two. Again, this show is laying all these seeds to kind of follow the path to the Starkiller base, and it's been really interesting to see. But that's what I got for this week's episode. Like I said, I enjoyed it. I wouldn't put it in my top 5, but I definitely think it was worth a watch, and I got a lot of enjoyment in viewing it. Let me know what you think about the episode in the comments. There's all kinds of ways you can talk and communicate with us too, please. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at Port Haven Forums. If you haven't already, check out our blog site, port-haven.com, which is a great resource to kind of find all the different things we do. We've started up an Instagram if you want to search for us on the Insta, as the kids would say, and we've also started a Discord server, and I would love to talk to you guys there. And until next time, keep it real and fly casual.
Cooking candy bar.